courage, intelligence, strength. These words can only begin to describe the men and women of the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Annapolis, Maryland. Many remember the dedicated scientists and engineers and technicians and support staff, and how their work affected many lives. Their tremendous innovation supported the most powerful Navy in the world. These are reflections of nearly a century of memories at the Annapolis Laboratory. Our story begins in 1903, when Rear Admiral George W. Melville fought long and hard for the funding of an experiment station to be built in Annapolis, Maryland. Melville's vision was to create an engineering lab to work synergistically with the Naval Academy. Congress approved $400,000 for a building and the necessary equipment to establish the U.S. Engineering Experiment Station, or EES. Construction materials were transported to EES by schooner and taken ashore in horse-drawn carts. With its new home on the shores of the scenic Severn River, directly across from the U.S. Naval Academy, EES was a hub of experiments and engineering developments in machinery, materials, and new technology. Under the leadership of Rear Admiral W.F. Worthington, construction on the main building was completed in 1908. Just 3 early laboratories existed: the mechanical, chemical, and metallurgical. New buildings cropped up quickly in the 20s as the station grew in activity and personnel. Expansion meant more jobs were created, and employees were required to learn new trade skills. In the 30s and 40s, the station was bustling with work. Thousands of projects were authorized at EES. The station attracted new employees from surrounding cities. On a regular basis, midshipmen worked on technical projects at the station, relating their skills to studies at the Naval Academy. With such tremendous growth, especially during World War II, additional support was needed in the marine engineering field. Early employees established the welding laboratory, where several pioneer experiments tested materials, equipment, and the weldability of complex alloys. The Fuels and Lubricants Lab was established shortly thereafter to study coal and different fuels and lubes for diesel engines. The Internal Combustion Engine Lab, ICE, was also chartered in the early 30s to evaluate new engine designs and produce better marine diesel engines. During World War II, engineers worked with the Navy on mass production of engines. The department was considered the largest diesel engine testing facility in the world. Jim Blose recognizes the significance of the lab.
At the time, there was no company in the United States building, with an assembly line, building diesel engines. So we were testing the engines that were offered and to try and see whether they were suitable for use on the Navy small craft.
As research and experiments grew, so did the need for more space. Construction began on Building 3A, followed by Kincaid Road and Leggett Circle. The introduction of paved roads allowed people to drive cars to EES rather than crossing by boat. Jack Wood remembers taking the ferry to work.
Sometimes we'd get caught out in the ice out there in the wintertime. Oh, we was glad to, don't have to get to work today till 10 or 11 o'clock. Oh, man, that was great. But We had a lot of fun on that boat.
When the United States entered World War II, many station employees served and fought in the armed forces. It was a busy time at the station, especially for women assuming positions while men were away during the war. At the same time, several vital projects were expanding at the experiment station. Harold Nutt explains.
We greatly expanded, however, during World War II to a point that we had a total personnel complement here of about 1,500 people. The scientific and engineering staff was considerably increased during that period.
To cope with growing work demands, the Chemical Engineering Laboratory increased testing on fuels, lubricating oils, and greases. They developed internal boiler and distiller treatments and worked on shipboard nitrogen generators, as well as the first oxygen generators and carbon dioxide scrubbers for nuclear submarines. An online citric acid cleaning process and procedure for distiller plants enabled ship personnel to improve energy efficiency and reduce maintenance requirements. The lab developed cooling water treatment systems for radars, electronic submarine batteries, and diesels. In those days, the Chem Lab picked up additional work for various departments such as the ICE and metals and welding labs.
The Chem Lab was famous for, one, the release of the Navy from the magic of brand name lubricating oils. They codified lubricants by their usage and by their viscosity, how thick they were, and were able to define a scope of lubricants that later got used by the commercial industry.
The first shock test machine arrived at the station in 1942, after the German Navy used magnetic mines during the war. The U.S. Navy was concerned with ship sensitivity to the damage that resulted from high levels of mechanical shock created by explosions and mines. Scientists and technicians continued to perform shock tests into the 90s on different weight shock machines to prove that new equipment could withstand such severe impact and improve ship survivability. Also during the war, the Bureau of Aeronautics Department initiated a project to develop and test jet and rocket propulsion. Dr. Robert Goddard joined the project team, developing naval rocketry at the Annapolis station. He was known locally for his experimentation on the shores of the Severn River in Chesapeake Bay.
But during the war years, actually, in this little building right behind you here, Robert Goddard worked here. And he worked here for about 2 or 3 years, and this was his lab back here. And back along the seawall, you find a little sort of steel chamber that we used to use for fatigue tests, where he used to test small rocket engines.
Across the way, I had a room over there where I had special testing. And he lived up above me in the Goddard did. And I would see him many a day crawl up. He used to be down on the waterfront. He had experiments going on that we didn't know what he was doing.
Goddard and other station engineers worked on jet-assisted takeoff, or JATO. The station's mission was to train Navy personnel on JATO. During the Goddard years, testing of devices, mission propulsion units, and development of liquid fuel rocket devices took place. After the surrender of Germany in 1945, and about 1 month before Japan's surrender, the Captured Enemy Equipment Project was instituted.
At the end of World War II, they sent one of our enginemen, one of the better ones, Danny Olson, to Germany with a number of officers, and they brought back samples of the new technology in Germany.
The German items brought home to Annapolis were far inferior to the machinery and equipment on U.S. naval vessels. Research was taken to a new level in 1945 when a German destroyer was towed to Annapolis for further study and later turned over to the French.
The German destroyers were brought in, and officially they were stripped of almost everything in them. It was amazing to see the workers from the laboratory going in there and carrying everything movable out.
Using explosives, 2 stainless steel propellers were removed from the destroyer Z-39. They were placed directly in front of the main building, next to the flagpole, and became a symbol for the Annapolis laboratory. Post-World War II years brought dramatic changes to the armed forces. The Navy introduced new ships and evaluated emerging technology. The Annapolis station remained in close contact with Washington to see how changes would affect EES. The station's focus shifted from testing and evaluation to research and development.
We started a number of things from the standpoint of primarily doing research in the area, and some of those expanded considerably. For example, noise reduction.
Laboratories were modernized and new departments were added. Pat Farrell joined the photo lab and describes his new job.
I went into the service at the end of World War II. I was on a ship for about 2.5, or actually in the service for about 2.5 years. I came back and I went into the photo lab in 1946 and worked for a George Gary. When I first went into the photo lab, I served my, I guess you'd call it, apprenticeship in the dark room. I didn't get out with the cameras until probably in the early 50s.
In the gas turbine lab, engineers studied machinery performance and mechanical soundness. It was discovered that salt sea air would have serious adverse effect on gas turbine performance, mainly due to salt deposits in the compressor. A water wash procedure was established to clean and flush the salt and restore the performance without any disassembly. Gas turbine research and development during the war generated workable engines by the late 40s. Bain Neild describes the lab's importance.
The project was initiated to do the research and development toward future development of gas turbines for naval propulsion.
In the Machinery Acoustic Silencing Lab, the great task of noise reduction was underway. The lab's silencing recommendations resulted in significant reduction of gear noises, especially in those plaguing shipboard acoustics. Larry Argero headed up acoustic data analysis.
With this particular facility, we were able to develop unprecedented type of noise reduction techniques for machinery, unparalleled throughout the whole world, that when applied, reduce the detection range, acoustic detection range of our ships, particularly the submarines, from thousands of miles to hundreds of yards. Now, this gave our Navy a military strategic advantage that certainly helped win the Cold War.
You could literally hear a pin drop in the ship's silencing lab. The specially treated building absorbed the noises with accordion-shaped material mounted to the walls. Annapolis claimed one of the best acoustic labs in the world. Ship silencing may be one of Annapolis's most significant contributions to the fleet. Dick Scholler and Dr. Lewis Ho explain why.
Well, we had a very diverse group of people with a lot of different technology backgrounds. We had excellent sponsorship from NAVC and other agencies that permitted us to have an academic and a technical freedom.
We were quite successful in quiet pumps, in quiet fans, in isolating the machinery vibrations, in predicting the noise generated by machineries aboard the submarines.
In the 50s, social and recreational activities were a highlight at the station. Employees were delighted when a recreation area, complete with a softball diamond and cookout facility, was built on the property. A private beach surrounded by trees and facing the Naval Academy was a favorite spot for swimmers and sunbathers. Thomas Mansfield reflects back on the recreation center where many took advantage of relaxing with family and friends.
The fondest memories of the lab are its location and the type of work we did. They both suited me to a T. When I came in 1950, one of the features that on the side was attractive. The engineering experiment station had a beach with a pier and a diving board, the bathhouse, and its own recreation area.
Memorable parties and luncheons celebrated workplace friendships at Annapolis. Dining at the station's cafeteria was an easy choice for a short break with fellow employees. Many employees ate lunch at familiar lunch spots in and around Annapolis.
Annapolis was a special place. It was an effective, productive community in a scenic setting. It was like a village of busy, friendly people with common interests in it.
Recreation aside, there was ample technical work to be done, including shock, vibration, and noise reduction techniques, and improved instrument systems. The shop staff was instrumental in supporting multiple requests from engineers in different departments. Jake Wogelmuth clarifies the role of the shop staff.
I'd say that the shop forces was very versatile. You name it, we could do it. That was a motto, really. We had all types of artisan, machinists, pipe fitters, welders, riggers, and then the test crew. The shops could fabricate or build anything when it was at full strength.
The submarine turbot SS-427 was acquired by EES in 1950 and was temporarily berthed in Worthington Basin. A few years later, the World War II submarine was moved to a quieter location in Carrs Creek. The turbot was a valuable floating laboratory for the Wave Mechanics Lab to conduct machinery noise research. Special events at the Annapolis station in the 60s included award ceremonies, recognizing individual employee accomplishments. Julia Ford remembers how women contributed to the awards day ceremonies.
They had any number of awards, and all the little secretaries would get all dressed up and they would serve punch and cookies.
During the ceremonies, recognition was given for superior performance and patent grants were issued. The prestigious George W. Melville Award was created to acknowledge distinguished scientific and engineering accomplishment. Larry Argero was the first recipient in 1960. Many prior Melville Award winners came together in 1998 to honor the last Annapolis recipients, Fred Flickinger and Dr. Herman Urbach. Howard Stevens received the Melville Award for accumulated work in superconductivity, related technologies, and liquid metal current collectors.
I was very fortunate to be selected for this award. I think it's most satisfying because it's the award for engineering excellence.
In the 60s, the Metals Lab and the Technical Processes Division Welding Lab merged, and advancements continued in steel testing. Extensive corrosion experiments were conducted in the Severn River and Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina facility in natural seawater and under adverse conditions. Historically, the Metals Lab pioneered the study of stress and fatigue and its effects on naval vessels. For years, the Engineering Experiment Station led the way with studies performed on the Gleeble machine.
Gleeble is a weld thermal cycle simulator. We can take small pieces of steel and run through steel or other materials and run them through a cycle like is seen in the heat affected zone of a weld, which is a region right alongside the weld that's not melted but is heated up. We did lots of neat things with it. Cutting edge technology, working primarily on the HY steels at that point.
The HSLA-80 and the HSLA-100 steels went into service in the 80s and 90s because of this early exploratory work. A completely non-magnetic building was constructed in 1962 to house the Magnetic Fields Laboratory. To meet the non-magnetic requirements, the builders used concrete, aluminum, and wooden beams as support. The lab's main goal was to improve protection against mines and to suppress magnetic fields from shipboard machinery. Magnetic field reduction was also critical in the study of minesweepers. As the mission of the lab changed to an R&D focus, a name change became appropriate. Technical Director Harold Nutt ran a contest in 1963, and an advisory committee chose the name Marine Engineering Laboratory, or MEL. In the early 60s, with the encouragement of Mr. Nutt, Dr. Kurt G.F. Moeller established the Independent Research Independent Exploratory Development Programs, IRIED. Under this program, the laboratory was provided funds to support internally generated ideas. Among the changes at the laboratory was the Naval Applied Science Lab's move to Annapolis from Brooklyn, New York. Much of the talent that was born through this merger became the Materials Directorate. Several programs from New York were recreated in Annapolis, including titanium, high-strength steel, and glass-reinforced plastics. They brought expertise in the areas of cavitation, erosion, ship de-icing, and vibration damping of equipment.
The quality of life here is completely changed from New York. The life has been more conducive to pleasant living. And I can truthfully say that Maryland is a land of pleasant living. That I have found to be true. So therefore, the move has been beneficial to me and my family.
Simultaneous with the NASL merger, the lab took over the nearby Nike missile site. Formerly owned by the Army, the Nike site was located on Bay Head Road, 7 miles from the Annapolis site. The 23-acre site was used for fire protection. Life-saving research. Metal spray forming. Machinery element repair and restoration. Urethane processing, and evaluation and development for an electrolytic disinfectant generator for potable water. Products from each field were implemented in the fleet. In 1967, the Marine Engineering Laboratory merged with David Taylor Model Basin at Carderock to form a center of excellence called the Naval Ship Research and Development Center. The new name formalized the joining of Annapolis and Carderock and their cooperative support to the Navy during the Vietnam War. During Vietnam, center personnel provided extensive support to the vessels used in coastal and riverine warfare. While there were numerous projects, the Quiet Fast Boat and ferro-cement material development were the most memorable. Jim Corder was one of many who traveled to Vietnam and remembers the Quiet Fast Boats.
It was such a successful project that as soon as it was evaluated, Admiral Zumwalt sent an urgent message to the Chief of Naval Operations asking for 10 more of them as soon as possible.
In 1966, the laboratory was a major player in the Deep Ocean Technology Program known as Deep Submergence. Several horizontal pressure tanks were designed to simulate the pressures and temperatures found in the deepest parts of the ocean. Submergence vehicles and systems were tested to evaluate their performance at deep ocean conditions. Lab employees also contributed to the Alvin vehicle design and its conversion to 12,000-foot depth capability. John Sass reminisces of the lab's enhanced credibility as a result of the success of the Alvin.
The Alvin has always been the nation's premier, maybe even the world's premier submersible. Certainly with its finding, or at least diving on the Titanic and several other missions, the hot vents in the Pacific and what have you. It's certainly the premier vessel. And by testing it here, we became a part of that.
The late 60s also brought about a series of changes. Linda Doolin recalls one turning point for women at the lab.
When I first came to work here, I and a few others were a little rebellious because women were still coming of age, I guess, and we were not allowed to wear pants. I decided, along with another girl one day, that we were going to wear pants because we had that right, and so we wore the fashion of the day, pantsuits, and we were at work for approximately 5 minutes before we were sent back home.
By the end of the 60s, another major name change was in store for the lab. In 1969, the command was redesignated to the Naval Ship Research and Development Laboratory, Annapolis. The 70s and 80s were a time of growth. Many departments experienced bursts in activity, while others suffered minor cutbacks. Funding was obtained from higher echelon commands within the Department of Defense, sometimes through a proposal or often via an assigned task. The submarine ballast blow facility was originally conceived after the loss of the USS Thresher, SSN 593. Art Smokler clarifies the impact the Thresher had on the lab.
As a result of the Thresher going down, we started a very big program called the Sub-Safe program. And many of the people at the lab, the ballast blow and the main seawater, and a lot of projects at the lab were trying to determine why the Thresher perhaps went down.
The ballast blow facility was constructed in 1969 to conduct full-scale submarine deballasting studies and for developing improved and safer deballasting systems and procedures. Ballast blow was also intended to be used for a variety of investigations applying to high flow rate, high pressure air, or water systems. In the early 70s, it was renamed the Submarine Fluid Dynamics Facility and has been used to perform noise and vibration tests and evaluations of air and water system components for shipboard applications. The current quieting technology used in the fluid flow systems of all major naval combatants was developed at Annapolis. The Navy's Environmental Protection Program resulted in the creation of the Pollution Abatement Division in 1971. Increased public awareness of water pollution resulted in the lab's development of the first sewage collection and oily waste treatment systems to be successfully integrated in the fleet. Early developments led to major advances in sewage treatment, solid and plastics waste management, oily waste removal, hazardous material control, and ozone-depleting substance elimination. The legacy of Annapolis was providing the Navy with the technological and engineering foundation required for compliance with global environmental regulations without compromising the fleet's readiness or operational flexibility. Department Head Harold Singerman led the environmental effort.
When I retired, work was underway to come up with the second suite of shipboard policeman equipment so the Navy ships would meet the so-called environmentally sound ship of the 21st century.
The composite machinery section also started in the 70s with the development of glass-reinforced plastic piping systems for Navy hydrofoils and surface effect ships. By the 80s, composite research expanded to propulsion shafting, piping, ball valves, heat exchangers, and fire-resistant ducting for naval surface ships and submarines. The rubber lab transferred from Mare Island Naval Shipyard in the early 70s. The hands-on work in the rubber lab involved developing rubber compounds and performing mixing and molding operations for various applications, including acoustic treatments, machinery and pipe hanger mounts, damping tiles and inline acoustic filters. The rubber lab also evaluated the performance of many prototype and current Navy equipment mounts to determine their vibration isolation characteristics. Annapolis employees had an eye to the future, and the atmosphere at the lab remained upbeat. Everyone reaped the benefits of the scenic Annapolis location and all of its amenities.
Well, some of the special things I remember about Annapolis, one in particular is coming down the hill in the morning and seeing the Severn before me. Also, the flagpole. The flagpole is quite representative of Annapolis.
In 1974, the facility changed names again. This time, it was called the David W. Taylor Naval Ship Research and Development Center. At the center, women filled important roles working in various jobs. Serving as secretarial support and administrative assistants, women were the backbone support to major lab accomplishments. Other women found success in management, technical and engineering positions at the laboratory.
Most secretaries did the regular secretarial duties and overseeing the office, but there came a point where they were asked to get more involved in the financial system.
Although less than 10% of engineers at the lab were women, opportunities in technical careers were readily available. Recruiting of women and minority employees was emphasized through the Equal Employment Opportunity Program. The Upward Mobility Program was created to transition employees from clerical positions to technical fields. Mary Bennett was active in EEO.
I felt that the EEO program resulted in more professional women coming to the laboratory, the women advancing to high-level positions. When I left the lab, we had at least one woman branch head and another one pending. So I feel we succeeded in that area. And we also tried to bring more minorities into the center and to also have them advance through the ranks.
The co-op and apprenticeship programs allowed men and women to learn technical skills and certain trades while going to school. Working for experienced journeymen, apprentices served as test mechanics, machinists, electricians, and welders. Orrin Craig managed the apprentices' studies.
And we worked hand in hand with the Anne Arundel County Community College. Our apprentices had to stay active and had to maintain skills, grades sufficient enough to stay in college. If they lost their grade level, well, we had to drop them from the course.
In the machine shop, over 75 machinists worked on about 30 projects at any given time. These projects included testing machinery for all engineers at the lab. It was a laboratory that worked with a multi-million-dollar budget. Orrin Craig remembers a major accomplishment.
The 5-axis machine was a computer-operated machine tool that performed 5 very intricate workpieces at a time. There are 5 operations on one workpiece. I almost fainted when we found out it cost $1,800,000.
In the late 70s, the Navy became more focused on electrical propulsion. Electrical R&D was performed in various laboratories, while early work centered on superconducting magnet development. The lab became a leader in superconductivity and electrical propulsion systems. Howard Stevens states that superconductivity resulted in new technologies for the Navy, such as the Ellis magnetic minesweep system built in the 1990s.
About 1978 or so, when we were looking for a boat to test superconducting electric drive on, we acquired a 65-foot test craft. And looking for an appropriate name, we settled on Jupiter 2. We were successful in about 1978 to 82 time frame in actually installing and running a superconducting electric drive system at 400 horsepower, which was built here at this lab completely.
In the 80s, a new building was constructed for the Paints and Processes branch. The Material Applications Laboratory, Building 183, housed research and development facilities for high-performance coating technology for surface ships and submarines. These coatings revolutionized corrosion control and marine fouling control for the U.S. Navy. Also during the 80s, several other test facilities were constructed at the Annapolis laboratory. Test and development was completed on submarine propeller shaft components for the new Seawolf class. Full-size bearing and seal assemblies were operated to ensure proper shipboard performance. The lab was a special place to work. Families enjoyed coming together for events and holidays. The Christmas season was triggered by all gathering around the flagpole for caroling, door decorating contests, and a myriad of parties. Halloween brought unexpected surprises every year. The annual Blue Angel Show during Commissioning Week and the 4th of July fireworks in the Annapolis Harbor brought many to the lab for a spectacular view. Employees who cared about each other used any excuse to get together.
I enjoyed some of the laboratory picnics we used to have where we played softball and did many other things. And then I had groups with whom I ate lunch regularly.
We had some great picnics out at the Nike site, and where families really came together and enjoyed one another, and that was a lot of fun. But we had a lot of little socials in the laboratory too.
In 1987, the name of the center was shortened to the David Taylor Research Center, the result of a special initiative by the center's commander at Carderock, Captain Graham. The Base Realignment and Closure Act, or BRAC 91, redefined the Navy's infrastructure. The Annapolis and Carderock facilities were aligned with NAVSIS Philadelphia to create the Carderock Division, Naval Surface Warfare Center. A direct consequence of BRAC 91 was the transfer of approximately 270 people from Annapolis to Carderock. This move affected 3 major departments in Code 60: Metals, Non-Metallic Materials Department, and Environmental Quality. A number of support functions also relocated. The transition was completed in October 1996.
Came here right as Code 60, the materials group, was commencing their relocation to Carderock. It was a real exciting time and bittersweet because I recognized that I was the guy who was going to end up turning off the lights and turning the facility over.
As a result of the BRAC Commission's decision in 1995, the machinery research and development functions were directed to relocate equipment and personnel to Philadelphia. Departments affected included electrical propulsion and power systems, propulsion and auxiliary machinery systems, machinery acoustic silencing, and other special projects.
Well, Code 80 has had a significant impact on the Annapolis lab in terms of what it's done for the fleet. If you take a look at all the developments that we've put out into the fleet over the long history of Annapolis.
The most devastating effect of the BRAC 95 announcement was the decision to close the Annapolis detachment.
Close the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Carderock Division Detachment, Annapolis, Maryland, including the Nike site, Bayhead Road, Annapolis.
Commissioner Kling?
Aye.
Commissioner Montoya?
With a heavy heart, I say aye.
Commissioner Robles?
Aye.
Commissioner Steele?
Aye.
It's pretty sad seeing a facility that's done so many things for the Navy, really important and difficult things. It's sad to see them closing up.
I was always very close to this site, you know, I was very close to the people at this site, and I just love this site. And I think it's sort of a shame that, you know, we couldn't have stayed here and built the building here and things like that, but it was just not to be.
For nearly 100 years, the Annapolis laboratories merged science and engineering to design better ships for the Navy. The modern fleet truly began in Annapolis, where scientists, engineers, and technicians supported a powerful Navy.
This was truly a very, very special combination of people, skills, facilities, and a work ethic. This was also the first place where I went to an ice cream social as part of the workday. And so they understood that you could work and have fun and work. All of that came together. I'm not sure if it was really work when they went to work. They did too much good work. They made too many breakthrough discoveries. They worked too long a set of hours to say that it was really work. To me, this was really a labor of love that they did for the United States Navy.
Lifetime friendships and irreplaceable bonds were formed at the lab. Many employees will stay in touch through gatherings, laboratory reunions, and annual holiday greetings.
Well, you know, a lot of people were awful good to me here. It's very hard. It was very hard to leave.
The Annapolis laboratory brought out the best of the engineers and technicians.
I've been proud of every time I go on a submarine or a surface ship. I see hundreds of things that I've recognized that we helped develop in the lab. But I believe that more important than the products that the lab has developed are the people they've developed.
If someone asked me about the Annapolis lab a couple of years down the road, I would basically tell them it was a very good place to work. As far as friendship amongst employees and things that were available for me to learn, it gave me both of those things, friendship and knowledge.
I guess it's all the people I've worked with, all the great things they've done, both that have made it to a ship and maybe that haven't made it to a ship.
The atmosphere was one of relaxation, professionalism. You could feel it as you drove through the gate. You could feel it as you spoke to the people. You could see it in the enthusiasm that the people had for the projects that they were working on and the pride of their workmanship and their accomplishments.
I feel that I'm going to miss the lab here. I always have fond memory of this lab, and I treasure it.
A great place to work, friendly people, and I'm really glad I had the opportunity to be a part of the Annapolis lab.
Annapolis was a magic place to work. I feel very, very lucky to have spent my entire career here.
I think it stands for marine science and marine engineering, and I think it has a wonderful reputation.
There was so much good that went on here, and the people were so tremendous. It was a tremendous atmosphere to work in.
I think that every time a switch is thrown, or a system is energized, or a pump or a motor is lit off, that is the legacy of the thousands of men and women who served here at the lab and the benefits that they've provided to the fleet, both now and for the future.
And so, in 1999, the history of a 96-year-old tradition of technical excellence, personal achievement, and dedication to the Navy has indeed come to an end. Despite the closure of the site, the legacy of the Annapolis Laboratory will live on well into the next millennium. It lives on through lasting contributions to the Navy, through memories of those who dedicated their lives to the work that brought them to the lab, and through the families remaining who supported the endless toil to achieve success that is second to none. It is with great sadness that the last chapter of this unique research and development lab is closed. Those who have so honorably served here have earned their rightful place in naval history. In no other place or any other time will such courage, intelligence, or strength exist as it did in the people who lived and worked in this magical place that was called Annapolis.